Hi, I'm Stuart. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back. Thanks for viewing my video. In this video I'm going to give my top 12 books of 2024, and I'm also going to give 3 honorable mention books. Didn't put a real lot of thought into this. I looked at my 5-star reads, and most of my top books are 5-star reads, and then I looked at my 4.5-star reads and moved one of those into my top 12, and one of my 5-star reads moved down because I didn't remember it too much, which may be unfair because I read it early in the year. So maybe that's the reason I don't remember it. And then I ranked them. Again, I didn't put a real lot of thought into it. Didn't overthink it, just kind of a rough order of the books I liked. Every one of these books I talk about I liked a lot. And more besides this too, but had to cut it off somewhere. The first of the honorable mention books is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Not a perfect book, certainly, but one I liked a lot. I loved the lead characters. I loved the storytelling in the sense that there was just a lot of tense moments in this book. I wanted to know what happened next. Sometimes it was a bit confusing to me, so that was an issue, but I just really liked it, and I just wanted to keep reading it. And I am partway through the sequel to this, Iron Flame, and I've pre-ordered the third book, Onyx Storm. So, very divisive book. Many love it, many don't like it, but I liked it a lot. I should say, too, that Fourth Wing is a romantasy book, which is a fantasy book where romance is a primary part of it. My second honorable mention is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. This is a YA fantasy. Some consider this a romantasy book too, like Fourth Wing. I personally don't think it should be considered YA, even though the two main characters are 18 going on 19, but they behave as older than that, and there's reasons for that it makes sense. This is set in an alternate version around the time of World War I, alternate version of England. The two main characters are correspondents working for a local paper, initially rivals, but they both go to near the front where a war is taking place to report as war correspondents. A romance develops between them. It's quite a good story. It's the first of 2 in this series. I've not read the second one yet. My third honorable mention is A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas. It's perhaps premature of me to say this because I'm about 3/4 of the way through. But 3/4 of the way through in this book is about 450 pages. It's a long book. And I can't say too much because it is the second book in a series. I'll just say that for me, I really love the way this book is paced. There is some very tense moments where the characters are in danger. That's interspersed with some sections where you get to know the characters better and gradual reveal of the world. And I think there's really good world building in this book. So I really like the characters, the ones I'm supposed to like, and like I said, this book for me is very well paced. There's a lot of descriptive text, so that may be too much for some people, but I really like it. More than Akatar, the first book in the series, this book to me shows why Sarah J. Maas is so popular. It's right now probably a 4.5 star for me, but that may increase. I don't think it will decrease. I may well finish this by the end of the year too. We'll have to see. Now I'm going to give my top 12, and they'll be in reverse order. The 12th is The Boy You Always Wanted by Michelle Quach. This is a YA friends to enemies to lovers story, starring two people who are, if I recall correctly, seniors in high school. The girl's grandfather is dying, and he wants to pass his kind of leadership of the family to a boy, and there's no boy in the family. So the girl in the story, she talks a former friend of hers who they had a falling out with to kind of pretend to be that boy who's going to be the grandfather, can know that the leadership of the family will pass to somebody. I should say too that they're an immigrant family, so say the grandfather is, his ways are those, I believe they're Vietnamese, Chinese Vietnamese. So his ways are those ways, and so it's a really good story, and there is, some discussion of what it's like being an immigrant in that type of situation too. This is a book that actually just happened to be at the library and saw, and I picked it up and I really liked it. The 11th book in my list is Mrs. Nash's Ashes by Sarah Adler. This is a grumpy sunshine romance. The two main characters are at an airport trying to get to Florida when there's a huge shutdown. I think it was pretty much nationwide. And so they decided to drive together there, and it's that's one of the plot lines, and there's also a plot line that goes back to World War II of two women who fell in love with each other at the time when, even more so than it is now, was frowned upon. And the woman in the first storyline wants to get the ashes of Mrs. Nash, who was one of the women in that World War II relationship, which didn't go really beyond World War II. And so that's the story, and they, as I said, a grumpy sunshine romance and a road trip. The 10th book is The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. In this book, the heroine is a very successful employee of a financial firm. She makes a lot of money. She is autistic, and this is another, her mother, who I think was an immigrant too. I think her mother was I think the heroine is the first generation born in the U.S. Despite the heroine's success in her job, her mother just wants to find a husband and get her married and have grandchildren. So the heroine decides that the problem she has with keeping a man is that she needs to be better at sex. So she hires a male escort, and he has his own issues too. The main trope in this is a miscommunication one, but it makes sense in the context of the story because you have an autistic person, and the man who's a male escort, he has a lot of issues in the past. He's kind of damaged, so it's them trying to get over their communication difficulties. It's quite an enjoyable book. The 9th book is A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This is a YA mystery thriller. The heroine in this book it's her summer before her senior year, and there's a senior year project they have to do. So a few years back, there had been a disappearance of a girl at the local school, and she was never found, but her boyfriend shortly thereafter was found dead of suicide, and he left a note confessing to the murder. But the heroine in our story, she doesn't believe that. She decides that for her senior project, she's going to look into the murder and try to figure out what might have really happened. I quite enjoyed the mystery. I enjoyed the heroine. She did put herself in more danger than I thought she should have, but it was a really good mystery. I like the resolution of it. It's actually the first in the series, which I didn't realize when I read it. There is at least one more, maybe two. The 8th book is A Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This is the book I bumped up from 4.5 to make my top 12. This was a dark fantasy. There is a underground, I guess you could say, community, and they basically protect books and stories. And there's another group who's kind of battling them, and it's quite creative. About halfway through the book, there was kind of a jarring change. It went to kind of a reality based to a very vibe based. But I adapted to that quickly and I really liked it. It's the first book that I've read that I really understand what a person says when they say a book is vibes. The second half of this book, I really understood what it was, what that meant. The seventh book is All Hallows by Christopher Golden with Ron Butler narrator and January Lavoy narrator. This is a really great horror novel based on Halloween, just the day. It's set in a Massachusetts town never named in the 80s, mainly set in a neighborhood in that town. And these supernatural elements are really good in this. They're creative and they're really scary, but what kind of sets this book apart is that this small neighborhood that the story is set in, there is a lot going on there. There is couples breaking up, there's infidelity, there is a couple that is reputed to have done some very bad things to children, there is domestic abuse, just a lot going on. This neighborhood, I think, does the small towns and Stephen King stories proud because just a very dark underbelly there. The two narrators did a great job on it too. They alternate. There's a man and a woman. You should probably tell when I said their names, but they did a great job on it. A great Halloween read if you want a good book to read next Halloween or anytime really. It's a great horror novel, I think. I recommend the audiobook. The sixth book is Yellowface by Quang. I listened to the audiobook. The story is told, I think it was first person perspective, by a narrator who's a author, but she had one book which kind of tanked, and she's sort of friends with a really popular author who she met when they were in college, and they're together one night and the really popular author dies. So the narrator takes a manuscript that the popular author was working on and she passes it off as her own. And she's a very unreliable narrator. She's unlikable. At the times I'm about to kind of sympathize, she does something else which makes me not like her. But it takes a lot of skill to tell a story like this, and I think Quang did. And head of somebody that's really hard to like, and she did a really great job. This is a very popular book and author, not without its detractors, but I personally see the hype for this book and for Quang. I certainly want to read more of her books. The fifth book is Funny Story by Emily Henry. I listened to the audiobook of this one. Another book that the narrator did a great job. The heroine of this tale, she's basically the last few years, she's kind of largely given up her life to the man who was her boyfriend, becomes her fiancé. His friends, or her friends, she doesn't really, her life revolves around him. On the night of his bachelor party, the man decides that he has feelings for his childhood friend, and so he comes back, he tells the heroine that she has to leave his house in a week, and then he just goes off. And she ends up moving in with the ex-boyfriend of the woman who's the friend of the man that dumped the narrator. It's a little confusing when I say that, and it goes from there. It's a friends to lovers romance, and it's really good. And in addition to the romance, there's a very strong friendship element where the narrator makes a good friend with a coworker of hers. So there's that too. Great romance, great friendship story too. Really liked it. A book that my second Emily Henry book, but on the two I've read, I really understand why she's probably the most popular romance author going right now. My fourth book is Clowns vs. Spiders by Jeff Strand. This is a really good horror novel. When the book starts, clowns are are popular, but their popularity takes a nosedive. They blame Stephen King's book It for that. And they're forced to work in a, well, not forced, but they don't have too many options because there's not much work for clowns anymore. They take a job working at a haunted attraction, and near this haunted attraction there's this mountain where about 100 years earlier some giant spiders, giant being they're basically as big as a person's head, some giant spiders took up residence, and they break out of this mountain and they storm the haunted attraction. And the remainder of the book is the clowns trying to save themselves and save some other people too. And the horror elements are really good, but what really sets it apart is it's really funny. The clowns have a code that they try to live by, and in the most dire situations, they're discussing with each other whether their actions are going to comply with the code. It's just very absurd and very funny. One of the few books the only one I can actually specifically remember that I literally laughed out loud a lot. Very, very funny, but great horror elements. What sets it apart is the humor. I'm sure it's not for everybody, and there's some fair violence in it, but very funny book. And that's why it was number 4 on my list. And my third ranked book is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. I listened to the audiobook while reading the physical book. The audiobook is narrated by Elizabeth Acevedo, and she is in fact I believe they call it slam poetry. She actually reads her poems in clubs. This tells a story through poems. It stars Zayamara. The start of the book is at the end of her summer. She's about to go in her senior year, and she wants to be a poet. She wants to write poetry. She wants to do slam poetry. And her mother is a strict Catholic, first-generation immigrant from the Dominican Republic. And she has very strict ideas of what she wants Zayamara to do, what she wants her to dress. And there's a real clash there. What I thought was exceptional about this book was that it's much lauded, deservedly so, but it's also accessible for somebody like me who might be hesitant, haven't read a lot of poetry. It's a great entry point, but also very well done, which the combination I don't think is too common. And if you do read the book, I do recommend that you listen to the audiobook while reading it. The audiobook is really good. My second ranked book is Diary of a Confused Feminist by Kate Weston. This is another book like The Boy You Always Wanted that I just picked up when I was at the library. I believe I picked them up at the same time. It was just on a rack at the front of the YA section. I saw it. The heroine of the story, the story is set in England, and the heroine is in school in England. I think it's probably the equivalent of a senior in the U.S. In the U.S., that would be 17 going on 18 and 12th grade. She gets bullied really, really badly. She has some friendship issues. She has some mental health issues. And I guess perhaps because I was bullied too kind of badly, I really identify with the character. Not necessarily an easy book to read at points, but I really quite enjoy this book. I really like the character. I really quite enjoyed it. And my number 1 book is Natural Beauty by Ling Huang. This is a horror novel set in the real world in the beauty industry. Here in the story goes to work. She's a child of immigrants, Chinese immigrants, and she was studying the piano, but due to something that happened to her parents, she stopped. She goes to work for a beauty lifestyle company, and it becomes apparent early on that there's some strange going-ons there. This book talks about a lot of stuff. The heroine was really bullied badly, and part which was really hard to read, and about how Western beauty standards predominate. So somebody who's Asian descent is still going to aspire to those standards. Horror elements were great. It's memorable characters, a lot of tense moments. Just a really good horror novel. Really recommend it. As I said, hard to read at points, but really recommend it. So that's a list of my top 12, which is 3 honorable mentions, which means it's kind of really 15. I am going to soon do my top 5 nonfiction books. And I'm also going to do my most disappointing books. That'll be 3 to 5. There's not many books that disappointed me. And if I do 5, which I might, the 5th book is probably going to be one I actually liked pretty well. It's probably only a slight disappointment. Fortunate that I haven't read too many books that disappointed me, but I'm going to do those 2 videos soon, and I'm going to do a video where I talk about how I did my goals for 2024 and the goals I'm going to set for 2025. Going to do those 3 videos, and then after that I'll get back to doing the weekly wrap-ups and tags. But I want to, as we're coming to the end of the year, I want to do these videos first before I get back to doing those videos. I'd be interested in hearing in what your top books are for 2024. If you'd like to tell me, please reply in the comments. Or if you do a video on it, put a link and I'll take a look at your video. I hope you have a wonderful reading week, and I hope you have a wonderful week in general. If you enjoy this video, please give it a like, please subscribe, please hit the bell to get notified when I upload future videos.